Hi everyone, I'm Shelly and you're watching There's No Place Like Home. I'm back with another Question the Narrative video, and today's topic is 8 lore-filled shows worth watching. A couple of months ago, someone left a comment asking me if I would be willing to share some of my favorite TV shows or series and movies. So I decided that I'm going to stick just with the shows this time. I'll do the movies in a separate future video. But I tend to gravitate towards shows that contain my interests, of course, because isn't that what most people do? So I look for shows that have folklore in them, that maybe have cryptids in them, maybe have some hidden history in them. So I'm hoping to give you some ideas if you're looking for some new things to watch. And by new, I mean new to you, because what you will notice is that most of the things that I'm going to share with you today are actually rather old. And unfortunately, that is an issue that happens a lot of shows nowadays. Just, I don't have an interest in the agendas that are being pushed. So I tend to gravitate more towards the older shows that it wasn't so obvious in. So anyway, let's just get started with the first one. And these are in no particular order. And the first show is Merlin, and I used to watch it on Netflix. I'm not sure if it's on there anymore. I think that it is on Tubi now if you watch it with ads. It might be on some other things. If I were you, just get a like a pen and paper, and you can write these things down and possibly search where to stream these, because I don't know where to stream all of them right off the top of my head. Merlin is a great show. Simply because it contains so much of that lore that I really enjoy. It has the Fae in it. It has Morgana, her name is here, also known as Morgan Le Fay, who was a Fae. And also there was Nimue, who is a high priestess in this show. And if you have ever read any of Gary Wayne's Genesis 6 conspiracies books, you will find out that both Morgan Le Fay and Nimue had associations with lake goddesses. So that's really interesting. Of course, there's a dragon in here. There's ogres in here and trolls. And, what I really like about it, though, is that it is wholesome nonetheless. It's something that you can watch with your children, unless they get scared of things like dragons, because there are some dragon fights, and we burning up Camelot at one point. So yeah, you might want to watch that if your children are afraid of those things, but this is something that contains so much folklore, and it's really neat to just find out how they insert it into this show and see what their take is on it. So Merlin is one show I highly recommend. The next show is Boogeyman Monsters Among Us, and this one I do stream on Tubi. And again, this is with ads. But this is not about the boogeyman, so to speak. This is actually about cryptids. And I think that I have shared about a little bit about it in some other videos. This is another one that you can watch with your children, though. Here's one of the less believable cryptids, in my opinion, that they talk about, but it's still fun. The Hodag Beast is one of them. They talk about Bo Nessie, who is very much like the Loch Ness Monster. It talks about, I'm trying to think off the top of my head, like the Jersey Devil. It talks about other lake monsters in Sweden and Norway. There is one on the Bell Witch, an episode. I tend to skip that one. I don't watch the one on the witch, but I watch all of the cryptid ones. And they're just a lot of fun. And again, it gives me a lot of things to look into, because I find out different things. For example, a lake monster, I think it was Normie in Lake Norman. It was either Lake Norman or one in Pepin. Lake Pepin, possibly. One of them is a man-made lake. So, and then it got me looking into that. Like, how could there be a creature living in there if it's man-made? Just lots of really fun stuff to do. So the Boogeyman is another fun one. Destination Truth is another one that I really enjoy. And again, it's because he is searching for cryptids. He goes all over the world, and they take a camera with them, as they're searching out these things. And I will say that in like the last 2 seasons, or at least the last 2 seasons that are streaming for free, they really started to gravitate more towards checking out hauntings and things like that. And those I'm not really interested in. But the cryptid ones are a lot of fun. And this is a show that I wouldn't call it wholesome, but I also wouldn't call it dirty. It's just one of those things that you just want to be careful of if you're watching it with your children, because there's some drinking in it from time to time. Not a lot. It's just, they're like out in a town, like say in South America, and they might do a shot or something like that. So those sorts of things. And just some jokes that some of them make. You just have to, a lot of kids probably wouldn't get them. But I figure if you're going to watch this with your children, I'm going to just warn you about that ahead of time. The next one, and this is currently the one, I watch this one every single night to go to sleep. I don't know why, it just relaxes me. But it's called The Bureau of Magical Things. And the video that I just recently did on this one, it was just about the idea that the characters in this show and the way that they are able to go from the human realm to the elf and fairy realm, it made me think of the spiritual realm, and if it's something similar to the way that things happen in Bureau of Magical Things, and if this is something that maybe the spiritual bodies will be like when we have them. Again, just it has lots of lore in it. It talks at one point about how the fairies and the elves and everything kind of were driven underground by the humans. It also shows how the fairies are able to be life-size, and then they can just shrink into the little pixie-like things that we will often think of when it comes to fairies. And this is another thing that Gary Wayne talked about. He talked about the belief that the fairies are Nephilim, and that these fairies did have the ability to shapeshift and also to make themselves smaller in size. Now, that's Gary Wayne's research isn't mentioned in this movie, but it does make me think of that. It also goes into some other lore, like they're looking for something called the Temple of the Purple Lotus. They talk about the Orb of Lemuria in here. So another fun show. This one is a wholesome show too, at least in my opinion. Okay, the reason I have to say it, the reason that I say in my opinion, because it is a show made for children. But in the second season, some people think that some of the agenda that I'm speaking of kind of starts slipping into it and nothing is shown. I think that maybe some things are implied. And if you watch it, I think you'll understand what I'm talking about. But again, I don't think it's something that children will pick up on. And it's something that I would consider to be child friendly. The next show, I don't even know if it was specifically a show. It might have just been a temporary series. I don't remember correctly. But it's called The House of Anubis. Very cheesy, as is Bureau of Magical Things and Boogeyman. You'll notice that I like cheesy things, but that doesn't mean that they don't have good meat underneath the cheesiness. House of Anubis, really, as you can see from the Eye of Horus, it focuses a lot on Egyptian mythology and a cult that basically kidnapped a girl. I know I'm giving some stuff away, but I don't know if you all might have seen it because it's old. But anyway, they're trying to achieve immortality, and they're doing this through the use of this Egyptian cult. They also just throw in some other things, like just what someone in my comments called breadcrumbs. They were talking about the building that they were living in was built in 1890. And I'm like, isn't that interesting that the year 1890 always pops up? And then, of course, you've got the number 33 at some point in the show, too. So I always look for these things as I'm watching these shows. But this is another show that you could definitely watch with your children. There's nothing in it that I would consider to be inappropriate for them. The next show is Grimm, and this is also a show that I have talked about here on my channel, and this is a show that you would probably really want to proceed with caution when it comes to watching it with children, just because there is some blood in it and there's some other things that children shouldn't be seeing in it. Not extremely graphic, but it's there. So this is something that, I would recommend that you just watch by yourself. It has so much lore in it based on the Grimm's fairy tales and the idea that Grimm's fairy tales were actually real, and that the Grimms themselves were the people who were destined to fight these creatures, these hybrid creatures. And so that is what Grimm is about. There's so much in there about the hybrids from different places. And I know that not all of the names that they use in Grimm are the actual names of the creatures in whatever country it comes from, but it's still, it's interesting. I actually have an entire book called The Mythology of Grimm, and it goes through all of the mythology of all of the creatures in here. It even goes through the weaponry that the Grimm, so he's the Grimm now, and it goes through his weaponry, and again, something that is filled with mythology and with lore. But again, this is something that I would not consider particularly to be child friendly. The next one is Monster Quest. This is an oldie but a goodie, and you know that I love my cryptids, and that's what Monster Quest is all about. I'm sure that some of you have watched this over time, and this is also one of the places where I get a lot of the ideas for the cryptids. And it really, I said that, well, at one point I said that when all of my children were grown, that I wanted my husband and I to buy a camper that we could just drive cross country and just visit all of these places just to look for these cryptids. You know, between Boogeyman and Monster Quest, I could pretty much map out everywhere that I wanted to go, at least in the United States, to look for these sorts of things. Although now that I have a grandchild and more possibly will come in the future, I don't know if I want to do that anymore. But it's still fun to think about. So Monster Quest is always fun to watch. The last one, though, I'm just going to warn you, absolutely not child friendly. Absolutely. So do not watch this with your children. And I'm not talking about Monster Quest. I should probably clarify that. Monster Quest is perfectly fine for children. But the next show that I'm going to go to right now, no, it's a no-no for children. The last show is called The Witcher, and it's based on a game by the same name. And I actually talked about this in one of my videos where I talked about the conjunction of the spheres that came from The Witcher. This has so much lore in it. I think a lot of it is Eastern European, if I'm not mistaken, but there's a lot in here that it's not common. So it was so much more interesting to me because it wasn't lore that I heard all the time. Unfortunately, the show is extremely graphic in many, many ways, and I have to fast forward lots of stuff in it. For me, I'm like, okay, I'll fast forward if I can just get to the lore part. Some people might not want to do that, and I get that. Because there are sometimes I'm like, oh my gosh, why do they have to put this in? Because it doesn't add to anything. But they did, because that's the world that we live in now. The language is also not great. So again, not something that I wouldn't watch it with your children at all. And I will say that while I mentioned that all of the shows that I watch tend to be older, this one is probably the newest show that I watch. And in the last season, some of the agendas of the world started creeping in to it. And so I'm at the point where I will watch the next season, but if I see it anymore, I might just have to stop watching this show because I can only take so much. So because even my oldest son plays the game, and he said that agenda that they placed into the last season, he said it doesn't even fit the character in the game. He said it's completely out of character for the character. He said it would not ever be something that character would do, yet they put it in the show anyway, and so they might lose a viewer in me if it continues down that path. But for the time being, I do think that the lore in here is really interesting. So I'm just going to mention it, but stay tuned. I'll let you know if I ever stop watching it. Again, a word of warning. You're going to need to fast forward through parts. Please do not take that lightly. But anyway, that's all that I have for you today. If you like this video, give it a thumbs up. If you haven't subscribed and would like to hear more of what I have to say, I would love if you would do that. If you have any questions or comments, you can leave one down below. And if you like my work and would like to check out my channel membership, I will leave a link in the description for that as well, or you can just click on it right on my channel page. And I hope you have a great day.